In this video, I'm going to show you how to make the smallest size of the Baby Claire Beanies. This is the 0 to 3 month size, and it should fit heads that have a 13 to 14 inch circumference. And I'm going to show you how to make this little guy right now. You will need some worsted weight yarn, an H or 5.0 millimeter crochet hook. This one is Clover & More brand, which is my favorite brand. I highly recommend it. A tapestry needle and a pair of scissors. All of my tools today are made by Clover. The gauge for this size beanie is a 15 stitches by 15 rows with single crochets give you a 4 by 4 inch square swatch. So if you want to check your gauge, I highly suggest that. That way you can feel more certain that your beanie comes out the right size. I'm going to start by taking our worsted weight yarn and making a slip knot. Insert our hook, and then the pattern says to chain 8. Now we're going to single crochet back down the chain, starting in the second chain from our hook. And we will do that for a total of 7 single crochets. Chain 1 and turn our work. Now for rows 2 through 36, we will be putting our stitches in the back loop only. So normally we would go here under both of the loops of our stitch, but we're just going to be putting them on in the back loop only, my goodness, right here. And that's where we will place our single crochets. This will create a ribbed effect for our brim, also making it super stretchy. Chain 1 and turn our work. I would like to point out real quick that when you make your chain 1s, you don't want to do this too tight because then your finished brim will not stretch properly. If you go like this and your brim feels restricted in something other than it's just fully stretched, your chain up 1s may be too tight and then it won't fit properly. So that's something to just keep in mind while you're crocheting your brim. And we are going to make 36 brim rows. And then we will come back and start working on the body of our beanie. Okay, after we finish our 36th row, we're going to chain 1. And then let's just take our hook out for a little bit and do some measuring. I want to give my brim a nice little tug here so all of my stitches can go and fall into place. And then I'm going to grab my measuring tape and let's see how long our brim is at this point. So unstretched, we're looking at about 9.5 inches. And then if we were to stretch it to fit the baby head, because it will be stretched when it's on the baby's head. It stretches all the way over here to 15, all the way over here to 15 inches without even being like fully stretched. So that is good. So then if it's at 13 to 14 inches, it's going to be stretched enough to stay on, but not so stretched that it's cutting the baby's circulation off. And then after we do some serious stretching, the brim might be a little bit bigger unstretched. Yeah, we're looking at 10.5 now after we stretch it out real good. Just for your references. Now we are going to pick our hook back up and close our brim. To do this, we're going to fold our brim in half and line up the stitches of the first row with the stitches of the last row. We're going to line these up together so that they're paired up, 1 and 1, 2 and 2, 3 and 3, 4 and 4, all the way through 7. Then I'm going to insert my hook into the first stitch from row 1, and then insert my hook into the first stitch for row 36. And then I'm just going to grab my yarn and pull through all the loops on my hook for a slip stitch. We're going to do that all the way down, inserting the second stitch, grab our yarn, pull through, making sure to line up all of the stitches for a total of 7 slip stitches. 6, 7. And we're going to chain 1, and now we want to flip our brim so that it's right side facing out. So we're going to put the seam that we just created on the inside so nobody can see it. Now we are looking at the right side of our brim, and we can continue with our body. To make the body, we're going to start by single crocheting around this portion, and you can see here it just gives it a nice clean edge to start with before you do your puff stitches. We will have to make our own spots since this is the raw edge of our work, and we will also have to do a few increases because we only had 36 rows, but we need 41 single crochet stitches, so that's going to be a total of 5 increases. You can just place them throughout the brim. You just don't want them all next to each other, so just do a couple stitches and then do an increase all the way around for a total of 41 single crochet stitches. And I'll do a couple of them here with you guys so you can see where I make my own spots. And that's where I'm going to put an increase. And I will be back after we get 41 single crochet stitches around. After we get 41 single crochets around for row 1 in our body, we're going to insert our hook into the top of the first single crochet, grab our yarn to join, and then chain up 1. Now we are going to start our puff stitch rows. To do that, we're going to yarn over and insert our hook into that same spot our chain 1 just came out of, right up next to our chain. And then yarn over and pull up a loop. That's 1. We're going to do that for a total of 4 times. So yarn over, insert, grab and pull up. That's 2. Yarn over, insert, grab and pull up. That's 3. 1 more. That's 4. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through all the loops on our hook to complete our puff stitch, and then we're going to chain 1. This will keep all of our loops there together, and also we're going to skip this chain so that chain 1 there takes up for that space that we're skipping. That way we keep the right number of stitches. So our next puff stitch is going to go over here. After we skip this guy, we're going to go into this guy. Going to do the same thing that we just did on the first one. 2, 3, 4, and then yarn over and pull through all the loops on our hook, and then chain 1 to secure it onto this guy. We're going to do this all the way around, putting a puff stitch in every other space, and that will give us a total of, I think it's 21 puff stitches, but I will tell you for sure when we get back around. Okay, I just finished our last puff, and it is 21 stitches in the row, 21 puff stitches. So I was correct on that guess. We're going to insert our hook into the top of the first puff stitch, grab our yarn, pull through and chain 1. Now for row 3 of the body, which is our second row of puffs, but this was our first row, so this is our second row. Now row 3, we're going to do puff stitch with the chains just like we did in row 1, but our first one is going to go all the way over here. Instead of right up next to the chain like we did on this row, we're going to stretch all the way over and put our first puff stitch over here, and that will put our last puff stitch in this hole, pushing it right up against the chain, and this will help keep our chain straight up the back instead of getting conky wampus. You can see that chain, it's pretty straight. So let's yarn over and reach all the way over here for our first puff stitch. Yarn over, pull through all the loops on our hook, and then chain. Do that in all of the chain 1 spaces from the previous row, giving us a total of, again, 21 puff stitches in the row. This is our last puff stitch for row 3, and you can see it's right in that same spot, super close to our chain. Then we're going to insert our hook into this stitch right here for our join, and then chain 1, and we've got the making of a very nice straight chain up. For row 4, we're just going to repeat row 1 and put puff stitches in all of the chain spaces from row 3, starting in this very first hole right up next to our chain 1. Do that all the way around for a total of, again, 21 puff stitches in the row. This is our last puff stitch in row 4. We're going to join into this stitch right here and chain 1, and now we're going to go in for row 5, which is repeating row 3, and we're going to put our first puff stitch all the way over here in this chain space, and then in all of the chain chain 1 spaces all the way around, giving us a total of 21 puff stitches in the row, and this will be our last puff stitch row that has 21 puffs. For row 6, we will start doing our decreases. This is our last puff stitch in row 5. We're going to join in this stitch right here and get ready for row 6. This row we're going to start making our decreases, and this will start to turn the beanie shape more like this, like an actual beanie. To start row 6, we start with a puff stitch decrease. So I'm going to show you how to do that, and it's going to be over these 2 chain spaces right here, so right up next to our chain, and then this first chain space from row 5. These are the 2 we're going to be decreasing to make 1. Yarn over, insert your hook into that first little spot, pull up a loop, but instead of doing that 4 times, we're just going to do it 3, just like that, and then we're going to yarn over and we're going to pull up 3 on this side, 2, 3, and then we're going to yarn over and pull through all of the loops on our hook. That completes our puff stitch decrease. Then we're going to make our chain 1 just like normal. Next we're going to do 3 puff stitches, 1 in the next 3 chain spaces. And then we will repeat that, a decrease and then 3 puff stitches all the way around. But the end is a little weird, and I will show you that when we get to it. Then my 3 puff stitches, now I'm going to do another decrease puff stitch over these 2 holes right here. 1, 2, 3, next hole, yarn over, 1, 2, 3. Now grab our yarn, pull through all those loops, and then chain 1, and then we go for 3 puff stitches again. At the end of this row, we will have 17 total puff stitches. Okay, time for another decrease. 1, 2, 3, next hole. 1, 2, 3, pull through and chain. 3 more puff stitches. And then a decrease again. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yarn over, pull through all the loops on your hook, chain 1. Now we have only, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces left. So we don't have enough spaces left to do 1, 2, 3 puffs and a decrease. So we're just going to do 4 puffs, giving us a total of 17 puff stitches in the row. Okay, now we're going to join into the top of our first stitch, which was puff stitch decrease, and chain 1. For row 7, we are going to start by putting a puff stitch all the way over here in the first chain 1 space. And then we are going to puff stitch decrease over these next 2 spaces. There we go, chain 1. Now we're going to do 2 puff stitches. That's 1 chain, and this is 2. And that will be our repeat for the row. We do a puff stitch decrease, puff, puff, puff stitch decrease, puff, puff. We're going to do that all the way around, giving us a total of 13 puff stitches in the row, and we do have enough stitches to repeat our repeat this time, so you will end with puff, puff. Coming up on the end of the row, I just did a decrease. Now we've got a puff stitch, and then 1 more puff stitch in that last space right up next to our chain, giving us a total of 13 puff stitches in the row. We're going to join into the top right here and chain 1. For row 8, we are going to start again with a decrease over these first 2 holes. So we're going to decrease over those 2, 2, 3, and again 1, 2, 3, yarn over, pull through all the loops on our hook, and then make a chain. Then we are going to puff stitch over here in the next space, and then we're going to decrease over these next 2 spaces, and that's going to be our repeat all the way around. Puff stitch, decrease, puff stitch, decrease, all the way around for a total of 9 puff stitches in the row, and that's very few, so I will just do all of them on camera with you guys. This little guy is so cute and tiny. And we will end with 1 extra puff stitch because, yeah, here we are. So we don't have enough room to do a decrease, so we're just going to end with 1 extra puff stitch in the row, giving us a total of 9 puff stitches. Join into the top of our first stitch and chain 1. Now we're just going to do a puff stitch decrease all the way around, starting in this first space all the way over here, and then this one here. Those 2 will be worked together into a decrease, and we're going to decrease all the way around, and then our last stitch will just be a puff stitch because we won't have enough room for another decrease, and that will give us a total of 5 puff stitches in the row. We are almost done. This is our last puff stitch decrease. And then we will put a puff stitch right here in that very last space because we don't have enough room for another decrease. And this will give us 5 puff stitches in the row. Chain into the top of our first stitch. Now for the last row, we're just going to single crochet 1 time in each stitch around for a total of 10 single crochets. Be careful to make sure you single crochet into the chain spaces, and not just, so let's see, I went into the stitch and not just under the stitch. This is just personal preference, but I like the way it looks better. If you like the under the stitch better, that's fine. We're going to single crochet all the way around for a total of 10 single crochets. Join into the top of our very first single crochet, and then we can cut our yarn, leaving a tail long enough for sewing closed the top of our beanie. To do that, we're going to use our tapestry needle, and I prefer the magic close method, and I'm going to show you how to do that. You put your long tail on your tapestry needle, and then with the right side facing out, just like we have been, we're going to insert our hook under the front loop only of the first single crochet. So it's just the front loop. We've been working in the back loop earlier. Right now we're just going to grab the front loop, and then we're going to whip our needle around and pick up the front loop of the next stitch. We're going to do that all the way around, just picking up front loops and then pulling our yarn through until we've picked up all of the front loops from the row. Okie dokie. This makes a very clean close. And then you can pull your yarn tight, closing up our little hole. Then I like to go ahead and run my needle under all of those stitches one more good time, just so it's extra secure. We don't need them falling apart on our friends, family, and customers. Okay, and after that, I will flip my beanie inside out, but first I'm going to shove that down into the center and pull it through on this end. Flip my beanie inside out and finish sewing in this tail, and then I'm just going to sew in that tail, and then everything is done. I sew in my tails probably a little too much, but I think it's better to be extra sure and know that this sucker is not coming out of there. If you purchase a crochet beanie and you're not familiar with crochet, and then you see a tail popping out after your first use, then you might think your beanie is falling apart. So this way that doesn't happen, and I don't get any poor reviews on Etsy from people saying their beanies have fallen apart on them. Okay, clip my yarn off. So in my last tail, and then we will take some measurements for you guys so you can see what the finished beanie should measure approximately. Okie dokie, now let's take some measurements of our finished 0 to 3 month baby Claire Beanie so we can see where we are at size-wise. We are looking at 6 inches in the widest spot. So this part is not as wide as the widest. This is the widest. And let's see how tall he is. About 5.5 inches tall. Now that could vary about 1/4 of an inch, because if I just gave him some stretching and readjusting, he's only gonna be, whoops, see, 5.25, and then if I just give him a little tug, that's gonna make him 5.5 again. See, so it's give or take 1/4 inch, I think. As long as you're not extra small, you should be fine. That is how to make the 0 to 3 month baby Claire Beanie. Stay tuned for the 3 to 6 month. It is coming up next.